phase one, phase two, all that kind of stuff, right? So when Japan attacked the American naval base at Pearl Harbor, the United States entered the war. Franklin Roosevelt made an address on the radio, and then he got a vote in Congress, and so the United States declared war against Japan. So now you officially have the US, the British, and the Soviet Union on the same side against the Germans, the Japanese, and the Italians, all right? So this would be known as the Grand Alliance. Franklin Roosevelt, American president, Winston Churchill, British Prime Minister Joseph Stalin, premier of the Soviet Union. Now, they have very different views and very different goals. Stalin wanted to protect Eastern Europe. He wanted to prevent the Soviet Union from gaining control. The Soviet Union had control of all of this. As it invaded the Soviet Union, it also gained control over all of this. So all of these Eastern European, Central and Eastern European areas are under Nazi control. Stalin wanted to get rid of the Nazis and then make sure that these areas would be safe for the Soviet Union, not have enemy forces there. And when the Cold War comes, that's really important, and I'll go back to that. Churchill wanted essentially to keep the world as it was. The British still had colonies in places like Egypt and India and elsewhere, and they wanted to keep that system. Roosevelt and the Americans wanted to get rid of all that and create an open door world. And if you create an open door world, that means that British colonies have to go as well. Because remember, colonies are closed. You can only trade with countries in your orbit or with the home country, the mother country. So all of that's going on, right? They're on the same side because they have to defeat the Germans and the Japanese. But they don't have a lot in common in a lot of ways either. And that kind of comes clear, and I'm going over the war really quickly. And one of the main ways that comes clear is in the debate over the Second Front. Now, much of the war was taking place way over here in the East. The Germans were fighting the Russians in the East, and it was these massive battles with millions and millions of troops. What the Soviet Union wanted was for the Americans and the British to begin an attack over here, all right? Germany was in control of France. So Germany had control then of everything in this area, all of Central Europe and Eastern Europe, and it included, like Belgium and France, right? So what Stalin wanted the US and the British to do was amass forces in Britain and then cross the English Channel and attack the Germans in France. Why do you do that? If you have millions and millions of forces fighting against the Soviet Union in the East, and then the Americans and the British attack in the West, establish a second front, what do you have to do? I'll give you a second, all right? Because I think right? You'll need to pull a bunch of your troops that are fighting in the Soviet Union, in the Eastern Front, and make them go to the Western Front to fight against the Americans and the British. And that would be better for the Soviet Union. So Stalin immediately wanted that. He asked for that in early 1942. And the British, more than the Americans, kept delaying and delaying and delaying. And that's why the Germans and the Russians kept fighting each other and brutalizing each other. By the time the war was over, the Soviet Union had 20 to 25 million people killed and lost something like 1 million farms and factories were destroyed, and about half of the Soviet economy was wiped out. So the Soviet Union suffered like massive losses in defeating Germany and fighting against and defeating Germany in World War II. So the Soviet Union always believed that the delay in starting an invasion from here was on purpose. They believed that the United States and the British purposely waited so that the Soviet Union and the Germans would beat the hell out of each other, crush each other, bleed each other in the East. And when the Cold War comes, after World War II ends, that's going to be a fairly big issue, like what the various contributions of these sides were, all right? So even though in early 1942, Stalin wanted a second war, it didn't happen until June of 1944, the famous D-Day invasion, all right? By that time, the Soviet Union had really hurt and damaged Germany really badly. Germany was in bad shape. They had been in retreat from 1942 on, and the Soviet Union had really started to crush the Germans. The United States was flying air missions over Germany, dropping bombs, which were doing a great deal of destruction as well in places like Dresden. So Germany was getting pretty beaten up already. And then when the D-Day invasion occurred in June of 1944, and these forces began to attack here, and then they would start pushing the Germans back. So in this regard, then after D-Day, you have the British and the Americans, and some French, the French resistance. The British Americans and the French resistance were pushing the Germans back towards Central Europe. Over here, the Soviet Union, the Red Army, the Russian forces were pushing Germany back. And then in May of 1945, they met and they defeated Germany. All right. So that's a very quick way to talk about